In this video, we're going to talk about absolute value. And when we're trying to determine the absolute value, we have to think about what is the definition of absolute value? Well, the definition of absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line. That's really all we're saying. So for example, on number 1, we have the absolute value of negative 13. Well, what is the absolute value of negative 13? If we were to draw a number line here, and here's 0, and let's say this is positive 13, and then on the other direction, we're going to have a negative 13. And if we wanted to know what is the absolute value of negative 13, what we're asking is, what is the distance for negative 13 to 0? So if we were to determine this, the distance from negative 13 to 0 is 13. Just as it is from here, the distance from 13 to 0 is 13. You're going 13 in either direction. So the absolute value of negative 13 is just 13. For number 2, pretty simple. The absolute value of 21 is 21. So now we're going to do some computations. We're going to do some equations with it. If I want to know the absolute value of negative 3, and I want to add that to the absolute value of negative 5, I'm going to make both of them. I need to find the absolute value of each one separately. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3, plus the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. So my answer is going to be 8. So let's look at number 4. Let's see if maybe you can figure this one out. So the absolute value of 9 is 9. And then we're going to add that to the absolute value of a negative 8, and that's 8. The answer is 17. And how about number 5? That would be 12 plus 15 is equal to 27. And now let's look at number 6 here. Number 6, we're going to find the absolute value of 21 minus 17. So we're going to look at the absolute value as kind of like, it's a grouping symbol here. And we remember that that would be like parentheses, brackets, and the fraction bar and such. So we need to figure out first, what is 21 minus 17? Well, that is going to be 4. So we're actually finding the absolute value of 4, and that's just going to be 4. Now I want you to go ahead and try number 9 right below that. Then we'll finish these other ones. Okay, so in this case, we're going to have the absolute value of 15 minus 23, which is the absolute value of negative 8. And that equals 8. Now let's go back and check these other ones, number 7 and number 8. Number 7 will give us the absolute value of negative 11 minus the absolute value of negative 5. We're going to get 11 minus 5, and that equals 6. So you try number 8. 4 minus 4. That gives us a grand total of 0. Okay, moving on to number 10. 24 minus 15 is equal to 9. And then here we've got 28 minus that absolute value of negative 26 is going to be a positive 26. So that gives us 2. And then finally, this last one, go ahead and try it. Okay, so we've got absolute value of a negative 3 minus 19 is going to be 3 minus 19, and that's going to give us a negative 16. Okay, in this next part of the video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the steps to solve. So you want to make sure that the absolute value expression is isolated, meaning we have done all the steps to get that by itself on one side. Then we're going to set the inside equal to both the positive and the negative number from the other side of the equation. And then we're going to solve both equations. So first, this is our step 1. We're going to make sure that the absolute value expression is isolated. Number 2, we're going to set the inside equal to both the positive and the negative number from the other side of the equation. Then we're going to solve both equations, and then we're going to write our answers as a solution set. Solution set. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on this. If I'm looking at the absolute value of 2, I'm looking at number 1, I'm asking myself, what are the possible values of x? So I'm saying, what could x be? Well, if I want the absolute value, x could be 2 different options. X could be 2 and negative 2. So we're going to write it as negative 2 and 2. Because remember, if I said the absolute value of negative 2, well, that's going to be 2, just as the same as the absolute value of 2 is equal to 2. Okay, so go ahead and tell me what you think. If that's the case with number 1, what would be 9? Or I'm sorry, what would be m? What would be the possible values of m? And if you determined that m is equal to a negative 14 or a 14, you are correct. Okay, so now we're going to get into some solving. So here's where we have to look at some different steps here. Okay, we're still going to do step 1. We're going to make sure the expression is isolated. And then but now here comes the part in the instructions where we have to set the inside equal to both positive and negative numbers here. Okay, so in this case, I've got the absolute value of 5z is equal to 40. Well, in order to solve this, we have to say that 5z is equal to 40, but we also have to consider 5z is equal to a negative 40. And we need to solve both sides. So in this case, if I want to know what z is, I'm going to divide by 5, and I'm going to find out that z is equal to 8. And then in this case over here, I'm going to divide by 5, and I'm going to learn that z is equal to negative 8. So if I was to write this, I'm going to write it over on the side. I would say z is equal to, and here's my brackets here, negative 8 and 8. All right, so let's go ahead and try number 4. I'm going to rewrite this as negative 7a is equal to 28. And then I'm also going to look at negative 7a is equal to a negative 28. So here, don't forget I've got this negative here. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 7. And then a is equal to 4. I'm sorry, negative 4, because I'm dividing by a negative. But in this case, I'm going to divide by a negative 7. I'm dividing a negative 7 into a negative 28. So then A is equal to a positive 4. So those are my two answers. So if I was to put that in bracket format, I'm going to have to squeeze it in up here. I would have negative 4 and 4 is equal to A. So continuing on with solving, now we're going to be doing some two-step equations with this. Or no, we're going to be doing some one-step equations with addition and subtraction. So we're going to say D plus 1 is equal to 8, but we also have to consider D plus 1 equal to negative 8. That's how we're going to determine what D is. So we're going to subtract 1 from either side, and then D is equal to 7. And then on this side, we're going to subtract 1. We're going to subtract 1, and then we're going to have D is equal to, well, if we have a negative 8 minus 1, that's going to be a negative 9. So we're going to write this as negative 9 and 7. D is equal to negative 9 and 7. You're also going to see this written as D equals negative 9 and D is equal to 7. You might see it written in different ways like that as well. So let's look at this next one. Let's see if you can figure this out. Okay, so on this one, we're going to say W minus 3 is equal to 4. Then W minus 3 is equal to negative 4. So we're going to add 3 to either side. So then W is equal to 7. And on this side, we're going to add 3 to either side. But this time we're adding 3 to a negative 4. So then we're going to have W is equal to a negative 1. So W is equal to a negative 1, 7. Now this last part, we're going to get into some two-step equations. So 4n plus 2 is equal to 34, but also 4n plus 2 is equal to a negative 34. So we're going to subtract 2 from either side, and this is going to give us that 4n is equal to 32. And then we're going to divide by 4 on either side. And then we know that n is equal to 8. On this other side here, we're going to subtract 2 and subtract 2. So then 4n, now we have negative 34 and a negative 2 is going to be a negative 36. So we're going to divide by 4, divide by 4. N is equal to a negative 9. So I ran out of room over here, so I'm going to write it over here that N is equal to a negative 9 and a positive 8. All right, pause the video and see if you can figure out this last one. Okay, so we've got negative 2v minus 5 is equal to 17. And then we're going to have to write this up as negative 2v minus 5 is equal to a negative 17. Okay, so we're going to add 5 to either side. So we have a negative 2v is equal to 22. We're going to divide by negative 2 on either side. So we know that V is equal to a negative 11. And on this side, we're going to add 5 to either side. So now we have a negative 2V is equal to, do that here, is equal to a negative 12. So we're going to be dividing by a negative 2 on both sides. And remember, if we divide a negative by a negative, then V is going to be equal to 6. So I ran out of room on that one as well. Let me change the color so you can find it. V is equal to a negative 11, 6, and 6. Okay, so that's all for today. So finish this and submit it. And we'll see you the next time.